It is understandable that there have been revolts against this concept, but to revolt against it, is still to believe in it. The point here should be especially noted. When you fight against something or someone, no matter how well-meaning the intention, you but fall into the ego's trap of making the error real. You would only want to revolt or rebel, correct or change an error you first established as there and labeled as a problem that needed attention. What does need our attention, however, is not a problem that does not exist, but the belief that it exists outside the mind's decision maker. Jesus now returns to the psychotherapist. Some newer forms of the ego's plan are as unhelpful as the older ones because form does not matter and the content has not changed. In one of the newer forms, for example, a psychotherapist may interpret the ego's symbols in a nightmare and then use them to prove that the nightmare is real. Having made it real, he then attempts to dispel its effects by depreciating the importance of the dreamer. This would be a healing approach if the dreamer were also identified as unreal. Yet, if the dreamer is equated with the mind's corrective power through the Holy Spirit is denied. This is another clear example of the ego's strategy. It cleverly moves the problem from the dreamer, the mind, to the dream, the body, and then causes the dream figure to believe it is real and is its own cause. This depreciates, if not outright negates the dreamer, and this denial of the mind is the problem. The ego first makes the dreamer mind real through guilt, then denies its existence. This prevents the decision maker, the true dreamer, from ever correcting its mistake and choosing the Holy Spirit. This was the meaning of Jesus' privately spoken words to Helen about Freud. He knew a bad thing, the ego, when he perceived it. He just didn't know that bad things don't exist. This speaks to the core of Jesus' discussion of psychotherapists as unhealed healers. They see the problem of guilt where it is not and then aspire to cure it, while all the time the true problem of the mind's decision for guilt remains undetected and unhealed. The otherwise well-meaning therapist then becomes an unwitting pawn in the ego's plan to preserve its existence through the strategy of our mindlessly attempting to correct or heal an unreal problem. If the way to counteract fear is to reduce the importance of the mind, how can this build ego strength? This is exactly what the ego has done. It counteracts the fear of God's wrath, the defense against the ego's fear of God's Son changing his mind, by reducing the mind's importance. Incidentally, ego strength is a psychological concept that refers to building up one's sense of self, which the ego has us believe is not in the mind its true home. Paradoxically, therefore, the ego's strategy ultimately undermines the ego itself, which depends on the mind for its existence. Such evident inconsistencies account for why no one has really explained what happens in psychotherapy. Nothing really does. These words were written in the middle 1960s when there was an ongoing research that sought to evaluate the efficacy of psychotherapy. The results were inconclusive. In some studies, 1/3 of patients improved, 1/3 stayed the same, and 1/3 got worse. The above is Jesus' subtle jab at those who try to explain what happens in psychotherapy. His answer that nothing really does reflects that by not dealing with the mind at all, therapists ensure that nothing happens to undo the ego and its thought system of specialness. Nothing real has happened to the unhealed healer, and he must learn from his own teaching. His ego will always seek to get something from the situation. The unhealed healer, therefore, does not know how to give and consequently cannot share. He cannot correct because he is not working correctively. He believes that it is up to him to teach the patient what is real, although he does not know it himself. Unhealed healers do not know how to give because they are afraid of receiving. They do not know how to give healing because if they did, they would receive it. Their fear of healing is our own, for we likewise do not want our split minds healed because they are the home of our individuality, the source of the unreal self. We, like the unhealed healer, protect our special identity by using every situation as an opportunity for reinforcing the belief in separation, i.e., we are different from the ones we are helping and are equally in same belief that we are the face of innocence. In this delusional and grandiose thought system, we are God's special people who escape their guilt by projecting it onto another, hiding behind the illusion that we are happy, healthy, and helpful, not only knowing what others need, but knowing that we are the ones to supply these needs.